Thank you very much. I wanted to test the acoustics of the room. The acoustics are both such a very good acoustics. Thank you for having me at the TEDxBuffalo talk. I want to talk to you about the African and the African American, the blacks, studies. It is very important to talk about the African American studies. Yes? All right, I don't really talk like that. Why did I do that? Why do I do that every semester? Why do I do that in addition to a bunch of other skits and impersonations and personas every single semester? To illustrate how we prejudge the essence of prejudice. Prejudging people. You think you know what someone knows based on what they look like. Black, white, brown, gay, straight, short, wheelchair, Syrian, Bosnian. Most people can't point these places out on a map. As a brown man teaching African American studies, I get my authenticity and legitimacy questioned every single semester, every single day. What you know about African American studies? What you know about hip hop? What you know about... Chemistry professors don't have to deal with that. Mic drop. Chemistry professors don't have to deal with that. You don't see Asians roll up on a physics professor. What you know about physics? Let me crack the ice right now. You don't have to be black to learn about African American studies any more than you have to be from England to learn English. You don't have to be from Mexico to eat at Taco Bell. I call my students Jedis. Might be some in the audience. I call them Jedis not because I fashion myself as a little brown Yoda, though the height comparisons persist. But we're learning about the force, the socio-political, the socio-cultural force that impacts our lives, that we don't see, but it affects our lives every day. I come to you to ask you, does African American studies matter? If so, why? If not, why not? Let me just say it flat out. If you think that Black Lives Matter means Black Lives Matter more, chances are you don't get it. If you think Black Lives Matter means Black Lives Matter more, you don't get it. It's Black Lives Matter too. Black Lives Matter also. Black Lives Matter. So if you think that way, you're going to probably think that African American studies matters more than psychology, sociology, and all the other social sciences and humanities. No, they matter too. We are a product of our teachers. One of my mentors, the late scholar Manning Marable, said that African American studies to be effective must be three things: descriptive, corrective, and prescriptive. Descriptive, it must describe what has happened and is happening to Africans throughout the diaspora. Notice how I didn't say African Americans. Africans throughout the diaspora. The what? Diaspora, that's the scattering of Africans all around the globe. This idea of listening to primary voices. I don't care what Bill O'Reilly thinks about Malcolm X. I want to know what Malcolm said about Malcolm X. I want to know what Malcolm said, what Malcolm wrote. Descriptive. And then there's corrective. We have a lot to correct, don't we? The image of Africans in our mind throughout the diaspora, Afro-Caribbeans, African Americans, Afro-Brazilians, you name it. There's a lot of correcting that needs to happen, and that correcting comes in three forms: distortions, misrepresentations, and omissions. Distortions. Good example of that is the Sambo, or the contented slave. Yes, sir. We're here to wipe your floors, sir. Shuffling. The idea that Africans were waiting on the coast in grass skirts, waiting to be enslaved, or civilized, depending on the Eurocentric education system that you were raised in. Distortions, misrepresentations. The false accreditations with non-Africans for what Africans invented, discovered, and originated. And the most ubiquitous, omissions. That's so ubiquitous. How ubiquitous? That we have a Black History Month. Started out as Black History Week from Carter J. Woodson. It's the smallest month of the year. 28 days, can't even get a full 30 days. Damn. Distortions, misrepresentations, omissions. And then Manning Marable, God rest his soul, he was so brilliant, but he was so cool. He didn't let his ego get in the way of his intellect. That's who I aspire to be. That's why I call my students Jedis. The idea that Yoda wants you to be better than Yoda. You have to also be prescriptive. Descriptive, corrective, prescriptive. Prescriptive, to take the ills of society and formulate what? Prescriptions, like your doctor does, to remedy the ills of America. Racism, which is in our DNA. It's in our double-stranded helix. Sexism, ageism. I think I saw a couple of people over the age of 40 in the audience. Nobody likes to be back in the job market after 45, 50, right? This idea of ageism, sexism, racism, homophobia, Islamophobia, they are alive and well, agreed? Descriptive, corrective, prescriptive. African American studies heals the illnesses of society. Your educational system and media are failing you. I'm not going to talk about the media. Lord knows there's enough about that. But let's talk about education. W.E.B. Du Bois said, by its very definition, education should challenge power structures, not replicate them. Schooling replicates them. Everybody in this room has been schooled, but are you educated? If you know your Latin, educare, to be led out of darkness, to be led to light, to be led to freedom. W.E.B. Du Bois said it, but Frederick Douglass flipped it on some other stuff. Frederick Douglass said the pathway from slavery to freedom is education, but the functional unit of education is literacy, the ability to read. Can you read and write? If we really know about Buffalo and poverty and classism, the biggest ism of the world, raise your hand if you know someone who can't read or write. Hands down, what are you doing about that? This idea of being functional in your literacy is important. Frederick Douglass saw that in 1865. I'm trying to ask you, what does it mean to be socially literate? Are you socially literate? Do you know about other cultures other than your own? Do you have to only know about your own people? Buffalo is so Polish, so Italian, so black. Can you learn about each other? That's the question I'm asking. Does African American studies matter? Yes, if you can understand the broader picture. This idea of we can be as separate as the hand. We can be as separate as the fingers, but as one as the hand in all things essential to mutual progress. Booker T. Washington said that, and he was criticized as being a house Negro or compromising Negro. But guess who he inspired? Bob Marley. How black is Bob Marley for you? We do this. We question, we judge each other's downness, how conscious we are, what you know about this, what you know about that, rather than having conversations. Social literacy is about having conversations. Jedis, are you out there? For those of you who don't know, for over 2 decades, going on 3, my classes are about making connections. I bang my fist together about 7,000 times. It's a miracle I have knuckles. My classes are about making. My classes are about making. Everybody in the TEDx talk. My classes are about making. Connect what you're learning to what you already know. White people, Imagine if you didn't have chosen migration, but forced migration, where you had your name, your religion, your culture, your God, your history stolen from you. And this idea that you did not get taught in the educational system and media about who you were, and people had perceptions about you. Fast forward to 2017, white people. And imagine the only way people learned about you was Jerry Springer. Oh, that's problematic, isn't it? Ooh, ah, ooh, ah. For African American studies to be effective, to be important, we must not just look at Africans in America, but we must go to the African diaspora. The African what? Who what? Okay. Somebody knows what that means. Old people in the room, seek a young person. That would be Little John. This is a Sankofa bird. It comes from Ghana, more specifically, the Akan people of Ghana. Most specifically, it's an Andinkra symbol. Return to the source and fetch. A bird turning onto itself. Return to the source and fetch. Holla back. Return to the source and fetch. Know who you are. Who are your people? I know I got a lot of Polish friends. Do you know Polish culture, religion, clothing, dance, art? Do you know Polish culture when you see it? Sankofa, return to the source and fetch. Chinese culture, Irish culture, African culture. This history that we're in, this 2017 history, it's far more advanced than this history that we're presented with in the education and media system. KRS-One, the most important rapper in my lifetime, taught me more than most professors. From Boogie Down Bronx, the Boogie Down Productions, said black history starts with slavery, African history starts with civilization. For decades, I've taught your name is your cultural compass. Let's really make connections with that. My talk is about making, this whole TEDx is about making connections. I've been doing that before I was invited here, I swear to God. Let's do a social experiment right now. Don't be afraid. Raise your hand. I'm going to say the name of a black person. If you know a black person who has that name, or you've heard of a black person with that name, raise your hand. Ready? Johnson, Jackson, Jefferson. Johnson, Jackson, Jefferson, Smith, Jones. How many black people do you know named Green? Named White? Hands down. For those of you named O'Malley, O'Henry, Zhang, Jing, all these other names, your name is your cultural compass. You don't think about that. You don't think about how lucky you are to have a religion, a culture, a God, a history. Jane Elliott said, you know what's happened to black people. You know what's happening to black people. Jane Elliott's a white lady. She said, you know what's happening with them, and you know you don't want it for yourself, but you don't do anything about it. African American studies is a mirror for America to look into. African American studies says you can't hate the tree but love the fruit. The idea that we love how black people run and dunk and rap and sing and do all these things, but we don't love black people. This is the hypocrisy of America. African American studies is a flame. It's a fire that can heat America and the world, or it can burn it down. To neglect African American studies is to play with fire. I'm asking you, everyone, to think about how you've been trained to think. I say again, to think about how you've been trained to think about how you've been trained to think. The media and the educational system is failing you. African American studies is not something you grow up in elementary, middle, and high school saying, oh, I want to be an African American studies professor. No, it's something you find in college. I always say, don't let 4 years of college stop you from getting an education. You leave as stupid as the day you came in, but you got your receipt or a diploma. No. But I say, don't let not going to college stop you from getting an education. We are products of our teachers. The late Gregory Demetriadis taught me to ask generative questions. It's not about showing off what you know, it's about asking questions. It's not about answering the questions. It's about asking generative questions, questions that generate other questions. Can you agree to disagree? It's easy to have racial conversations with people in your own community, but can you do it and disagree and see where you can actually come to a common ground? Is your popular culture making you smarter or dumber? Some people in this room know the power of folk music. Now it makes sense, but you don't listen to hip hop. You don't understand how Kendrick Lamar, oh, God, I was about to say Drake. I love my wife. Drake. J. Cole. I'm a product of KRS-One, Rakim, and Chuck D. Is your popular culture making you smarter or dumber? I don't think anyone would deny that Bob Dylan made us smarter. And if you do, what century are you living in? Another deep question and thought. In my class, we call them DQTs. DQ what? And we actually take notes, we write them down, and we actually, DQT number, and they're like 7, and they write it down. Here's one. Why is black music so welcome in places that black people aren't? Raise your hand high if you've ever been to a club where black music's pumping, but black people aren't welcome. So that drives to the question, how does America like its black folk? Answer, passive, silent, complicit, non-resistant. I got a news flash for you. Black people are not here for your entertainment. They're not here for your dancing, your rap, your dunking, and all these things. They're not here for the boxes that you've circumscribed for them. And this class is about making, it's not, Indian people are not just supposed to be working 7-Eleven and cab drivers either. How you feel about African American studies reflects how you've been trained to think. I ask you to think about how you've been trained to think. African American studies can heal the wounds of America, or they can deepen them when neglected. African American studies can heal the world, but it's not part of our curriculum. So I'll leave you with this concept. I'll leave you with this idea. I'll leave you with this spiritual mission. If what you learned isn't worth sharing, it wasn't worth being learned. I ask you to learn about someone other than yourself, and then, God willing, share it with somebody.